An American reporter for the Wall Street Journal is waking up in detention in Russia on charges of espionage. Evan Gershkovich is a 31-year-old correspondent based in Moscow. He was arrested yesterday and accused of trying to steal state secrets about a Russian military factory, accusations that we should take with a grain of salt considering where they're coming from. In a statement, the Journal said it, quote, vehemently denies the allegations from the FSB and seeks the immediate release of our trusted and dedicated reporter. Russia has not arrested a reporter on charges like this since the Cold War in 1986. That's the last time that an American journalist was detained by Russia simply for doing their job on charges of espionage. Few people really know what Evan Gershkovich could be going through right now, possibly. One of them, though, is Trevor Reed. He was released last April in a prisoner swap after he was detained in Russia for 985 days. Reed is a former Marine. He had been sentenced to 9 years in prison in July 2020 for apparently and allegedly endangering the life and health of Russian police officers in an altercation. Those are charges we should note that he is steadfastly denied. I spoke to Trevor Reed last night about the arrest of Evan Gershkovich. What goes through your mind when you hear that another American, this time a journalist arrested on espionage charges, has been detained in Russia?
Well, first of all, it immediately, comes to me as being another wrongful detention of an American in Russia. Obviously, those charges sound extremely fishy, charging a journalist with espionage, and I think that also kind of signals the escalation that the Russians are taking by taking a journalist and wrongfully detaining them and basically taking them hostage.
You have an experience that so few people have because to a degree you know what he's going through. Can you just remind us, what were your first few hours in detention like? What do you imagine that he's going through right now?
The first few hours when you're wrongfully detained are extremely confusing. You're in a state of shock. You're also in a state of denial. You're thinking that there's no possible way that this is happening to me. Maybe it's just a nightmare. Maybe I'm gonna wake up and this didn't happen. And unfortunately for me, that kind of, just surreal feeling lasted for basically the whole almost 3 years that I was detained.
Yeah. And when Evan was formally arrested, his own attorney wasn't even allowed in the courtroom. You obviously dealt up close and personally with the Russian judicial system, as I guess we'll call it. How do you fear that he's going to be treated by them?
There's no question that the Russian judicial system is a joke. It's a facade. They violate all of their own rules, regulations, laws there, and there's no type of accountability for Russian officials who break those laws. They can basically do anything that they want, and unfortunately they will do whatever they want.
Some members of Congress have said they think they basically have just outright called this a hostage situation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's the wrongful detention is equivalent to taking a hostage. They've clearly done this for political purposes, to gain some kind of leverage over the United States or make an example out of them, to make a point, maybe as like a revenge thing.
After you were released, you gave an interview with my colleague Jake Tapper, and you talked about essentially the way you were treated, that the Russian government isn't just operating from the top down. You said, speaking of them, quote, they have absolutely no value of human life. You said that apathy permeates every level of Russian government. Everyone who works for that government has absolutely no empathy for other humans. Do you worry that that treatment, the way that they treated you, has only gotten worse the way that they're treating Americans now?
Absolutely. I think that as Russia becomes more desperate due to sanctions, their war in Ukraine failing, political pressure from the United States, I think that the more desperate they get, the more brutal and kind of apathetic they're going to be regarding, our citizens there.
What does it say to you about the state of U.S.-Russia relations at this point?
I think that this is a perfect example that our relations have hit an all-time low. Russia hasn't taken a journalist and accused them of espionage since the Cold War. And taking a journalist, that kind of puts it into perspective for you how desperate the Russians have become. I think, you know, the next step after taking our journalists hostage there is basically diplomats is the next level, and it says something about how far they're willing to go and how much they just basically don't care about their image in the international theater.
Given you lived through this, what's your advice to his family, his friends at this point, his colleagues as they're watching this?
I would tell them that they need to prepare themselves for, you know, a long fight, and they need to start taking steps immediately to prepare them for that fight. And I would also tell them to be cautiously optimistic. You know, my family put in an enormous amount of effort and time in order to get me out, and that paid off. The Biden administration, President Biden, agreed to do a prisoner exchange, and that got me out, and that was pretty much because of what my parents had done there.
Yeah, your parents, I mean, I was at the White House the day your parents came out. It was pouring rain, and they stood out in front of the White House because they wanted a meeting with President Biden to be able to raise your detention. What do you think President Biden should do in this moment? What do you want to see from the U.S. government here?
I want to see some definite action. You know, they're going to have to make some type of agreement to get him out. I don't know if that's going to involve a prisoner exchange. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that go into those negotiations, but I think that it's our government's duty to do whatever it takes to get innocent Americans out. And also on that note, I want to thank you because it's actually a year since you asked President Biden if he would meet with my parents at the White House.
Will you meet with Trevor Reed's parents, Mr. President, while they're here in Washington? They say that you promised them a meeting.
I'm going to see if I can get to see them. They're
Today?
good. They're good people. We're trying to work that out.
My mom will get real angry with me if I don't mention that and say thank you from all of us.
Well, your parents are amazing, and that was what any reporter should do, and anything to help.
I'm just so glad he survived, and I noticed the first thing when I looked at your interview running on the air, I said he looks healthy. Now, he's so thin when he returned.
Yeah, well, he lost a lot of weight, and I mean, his perspective, you know, we did that interview with Jake, he talked about how bad the diet was. Small things from just the everyday life in Russian prison, and also talking about how he just thinks there's a complete apathy and like lack of regard for human life in Russia, saying it's not just with Putin, it's the entire government. Just a remarkable moment. So I'm really glad that Trevor Reed sat down with us.
And mentally healthy as well. We're glad that he's doing okay.
To whatever it is going through.
Nice interview,
essentially
Kate.
now. And shows the power of a reporter question to the president.
Yeah.
Good job.